central and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the cloud will build up at times. Temperatures will be similar to Saturday, so generally around, if not a little below average for the time of year, and there'll be more to come as we head into next week.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, team. It's 7 o'clock and I'm Laurence Fox. Boy, do I have an Ofcom compliant show for you tonight, especially as I'm still hanging on to the tail of the elephant in the room, excess deaths. Firstly, I will be joined by Dr. Tina Pears for her analysis of recent data and her opinion on how COVID was handled from the start. Then I'm speaking to Dr. Roland Salmon, former Director of Communicable Diseases for Public Health Wales, for his opinion. Yes, different views. Ofcom compliance! And you get to put Fox on the spot and ask me anything you want, and then I will dish it out with the legend, the rebel with a cause, Andrew Bridgen, Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire, on recent events surrounding his public opinions. And don't forget, most importantly, I want to hear from you. So send me your views my way at gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's all coming up after the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Laurence, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News at 1 minute after 7 o'clock. The UK has marked 1 year since Russia first invaded Ukraine, with a minute's silence today. And at Downing Street today, the Prime Minister reflected on the country's losses with Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. Britain has also imposed new sanctions, including an export ban on equipment Russia uses on the battlefield, whilst President Putin's closest allies have also been targeted. And in Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky attended a ceremony with families of soldiers killed in the conflict, describing the last 12 months as a year of pain and sorrow, but also of faith and unity. And tonight, world leaders have come together to ramp up sanctions against Russia in a show of what they're calling unwavering support for Ukraine. The G7 group, who've met virtually today, says they're taking further steps related to Russia's economy to undermine its capacity to wage its illegal aggression. It's now calling on third parties that evade its measures to stop materially supporting President Putin's war or themselves face severe costs. In other news today, police in Northern Ireland say they're treating the shooting of an officer in Omagh in County Tyrone as terrorist-related, with the new IRA their chief line of inquiry. Stormont says it's united in standing with the PSNI after Wednesday's shooting. The man who was shot, Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell, remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital after being shot by two masked gunmen at a sports centre. His injuries said to be life-changing. And a fourth man has been arrested in connection with his attempted murder. Sinn Féin's Vice President Michelle O'Neill described it as an attack on the entire community.
I think it's important that we continue to send a united message to wider society. We this year celebrate 25 years of our Good Friday Agreement, and so much that's been achieved over those past 25 years. Our society has been completely transformed, and we're not going to allow anybody to reverse any of that progress that's been made. So that's why it's very important that we do put across today that this is an attack on the community, this is an attack on all of us, and this is an attack that none of us will ever tolerate.
Junior doctors are to stage 3 days of strike action next month. The British Medical Association has announced they'll have their doctors walk off the job from the 13th of March. Nearly 37,000 BMA members voted in favour of industrial action. That's the largest ever turnout for a ballot of doctors, and it follows a strike by nurses and ambulance workers. That's news headlines at 7. I'm back at 8.
If it is true, as a man once said, that depression is merely anger without enthusiasm, then it could be said that the whole of the United Kingdom is in a state of national depression. Everywhere you turn, there are reasons not just to be angry, but to be downright furious. And yet, on a parallel continuum, there are people fearful to speak their minds in public, or in most cases even register their mild dissatisfaction in private. Such as the fear of the repercussions of exerting our right to free expression, or to challenge the assembled narrative. The crucial codependent relationship all human beings require with reality has been utterly undermined, and in its place is a new unreality with its own unenlightenment values, a vortex from which no one can escape. All the scenery is the same, the trees, the rivers, the valleys and the mountains, but reality as we knew it is a fading memory. For those who cannot see, life continues on in ignorant bliss. And for those who do see, we are left with a choice, to go gentle into that good night or to rage against the dying of the light. I envy those, I deeply envy those mainlining propaganda and comforted by deceit. They are the happy ones, happy to receive an intermittent text from their GP telling them that it's time to be a good citizen again and go and book their appointment to be experimented upon for the good of their fellow man. The warm sense of satisfaction that by potentially poisoning themselves, they will in some way be serving a greater good. I envy the blind and virtuous smugness of it all. But more than that, I am angry, as are so many, that this regime and its unelected leader have not come to the country, to their fellow men and women, in sincere apology for the harms done to so many, in order that they may be unshackled and free to leave their own homes. Surely there must be a reckoning coming, I ask myself. The excess bodies continue to pile up as a result of the catastrophic failed public health experiment of lockdown, cessation of society and trade, the near shutdown of the health service, education, and the hurriedly introduced novel medications, which were mandated, guilt-tripped, coerced, and some might even say outright lied to the public with the promise of a far-off and normal Christmas. Coerced with scant regard to the scientific method, or in many cases, a deliberate refusal to even apply the scientific method in the name of expeditious profit. And yet what does the regime do? Like a canny hypnotist from a well-worn pocket, it once again produces the trusty gleaming watch and gently swings it in front of our eyes, drawing us in and away from the shredded social fabric and onto the next thing to terrify and subdue us with. A climate crisis, perhaps, or far-off fights which lead us obedient sheep, incapable of opposition, towards the inevitable consequences of playing chicken with a fully tooled-up nuclear madman. The population can't be blamed for this. How can we, after years of fretful sleep, gather our thoughts enough to resist when we aren't even on our own side anymore, when we are too tired to fight? But fight we must, for the truth. Else there will be no reckoning over the COVID catastrophe. There won't even be a Truth and Reconciliation Committee where the regime supplicate themselves before the people in false humility, rictus grin, firm and immovable, to praise their safe and effective vaccines, at the same time somberly assuring us that lessons have been learned, that protocols will be put in place in time for the next inevitable pandemic. Protocols based on public health rather than big pharma profits. Will there be a statement issued saying that these snake venom salesmen will not be granted indemnity in future from the harms that their hastily assembled controversial medicines have caused? I doubt it very much. There won't even be a helpline for those who have been denied a full life, or indeed a life at all, after taking their bad medicine. There will be no trials for alleged crimes against humanity. Instead, there will be silence, permanent and final. Let's not all drag that up again, darling, they will say. There will be no rage against the dying of the light. Unless, in the time we still have to stop standing idly by, we start standing nose to nose with those we foolishly entrusted with our well-being to state some fairly uncomfortable truths and put an end to the Britain Last policies so fashionable in these postmodern times. We can only begin with the restoration and defence of the primacy of free expression and an end to compelled speech. Perhaps begin by following the sensible people of Scotland who rid themselves of their own woke empress recently and say loudly, there are male and there are female, the end. You can identify as a pumpkin for all I care, live your best life, but you will not compel me into agreement that you are a pumpkin. Let us control our borders by promising those who enter our country illegally that they will never get their hands on a British passport. Genuine refugees are welcome and should make an asylum claim from the nearest safe country from their war-torn home. We can no longer have uncontrolled, unsustainable immigration without careful and considered assimilation. If we need to leave the EHCR to do it, then fine. We will take Article 10 with us. Thank you very much for a new British Bill of Rights. And let us ditch this secular religion of net zero, or at least defer it until the demands it requires don't outstrip the penury it will create. And let us say no to low-traffic neighbourhoods, 15-minute cities, and taxation in the name of salvation, strategies of power and control designed to deprive you of yet more of your freedom. We must say no to a future of battery-farmed humanity, and yes to the promise of the generations, to make a life more prosperous, free and wonderful for our children than the one we have experienced ourselves. Dusk is here, night is fast approaching. Let us not allow the disaster of COVID to be the legacy we leave to those who come after. Let it be a lesson in what must never happen again. First up, tonight, we're talking, you guessed it, COVID, vaccine efficacy. Sorry, Ofcom, but especially when it comes to women's health. I've been chopping my way through a pretty in-depth public report from the MHRA on the subject, and joining me to pick it all apart is Dr. Tina Pearce, consultant in reproductive health and menopause specialist with a background in general practice. Good evening, Dr. Pearce. How are you doing?
Hello.
Can we start with women's health and the vaccine? Because it's something that's not really discussed.
No. Well, if you looked at that MHRA report for the public, you will see that they didn't do any fertility studies. Pages 16 to 21 are of particular interest for people to look at if they're interested. They did no fertility studies, and they didn't even do fertility studies in animals. They were exempt. The studies and trials were exempt, which is most peculiar. They didn't do any studies in pregnant women, and yet it was pushed on pregnant women. And we know from the Pfizer studies themselves that they said to the women in the studies, you must not get pregnant, you must use contraception, you mustn't get pregnant under any circumstances. And human nature being what it is, 25 women did get pregnant. And out of the 25 pregnancies, there were 15 miscarriages, which means that's 58% miscarriage rate for women who were vaccinated and became pregnant. And out of the 9 babies that were born, 5 had congenital abnormalities. So this is a complete disaster, absolute disaster. And we've seen miscarriage and stillborn baby rates go up enormously, actually. In Scotland, the normal rate is 2 in 1,000, and it's gone up to 4.9 in 1,000, which is the highest level for over 10 years.
Is this? I mean, those are just absolutely shocking numbers. Is this just one study, or is this backed up?
It's backed lots and lots of data, lots of data. And if you look at the VAERS reports and the MHRA yellow card system and the ultravigilance, then it's all there. Lots of miscarriages, lots of... some centres are reporting a 78% miscarriage rate, which is extraordinary, quite extraordinary. And infertility, there was a study in Israel looking at male infertility. They looked at sperm count in young men aged 24 to 26 who should be, firing good stuff. And they had...
older.
And they had, they did it before they had any vaccines, which is the right way to do it, so you can see your baseline. And then at various intervals after the second dose, and even at 6 months, their sperm count was down 15.9% and the motility was down 22%.
Is there anything else that we can apply this drastic change in fertility to, in your view, at all?
No, I don't think so. It's, you can apply the Bradford Hill criteria to see if something it actually causes it, and I'm afraid it ticks all the boxes. So all the epidemiologists are saying it is the vaccine, and it's the highly vaccinated countries that are having the biggest rates of lower fertility. So in Hungary, for example, their birth rate's down 20%, which is phenomenal.
So why are the National Health Service saying that this is, and any government minister saying they're safe and effective?
I don't know. I really don't know. They didn't do any biodistribution studies before they took it to the market, and they weren't required to. and studies have subsequently...
Sorry to slow you down.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through that? Because I'm not baffled, I'm shocked by this. A, that they're indemnified against any, terrible side effects of these things. But why were they not required to, at the very least, do these?
I don't know. I don't know. It's baffling. There aren't any drugs that we put on, we don't give any medication that's experimental to pregnant women. We just don't do that.
But we were told, I remember being very clearly listening to on the radio, being told it's totally safe and effective for a pregnant woman.
It was
and I would,
true.
I have no medical qualifications whatsoever, but I would imagine a novel drug, you wouldn't know whether it was safe and effective for a woman because a woman hasn't even been through the gestation period to give birth to a child and see how that child turns out.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, many people felt that the MHRA would be regulating all of this and making sure it was safe and effective and that it was perfectly fine and had been tried and tested. And people assumed that, it had actually gone through all the proper trials, but it hasn't.
So why are the MHRA why the government, why are the health service, why is pretty much every media organisation saying that these things are safe and effective?
I don't know if they're captured. I don't know. The MHRA...
Do you think they're captured, or do you think it's is it possible that it's a sort of hangover of the COVID hysteria that began, and that they're stuck in a narrative that they just keep saying safe and effective whenever there's a problem?
Yes, I don't know. It might be that, mightn't it? But, you know, with any intervention, you have to look at, first of all, is it necessary? And if we go back and look at the infection fatality rate for COVID, it's actually, on average, 0.24% across all age groups. And in the under 18s, it's 0.0003%. So there's no way that it's a problem for young, healthy people. And it's 0.03% as an average infection fatality rate from the age of 0 to 59. So it's only the elderly that this is an issue, ever has been an issue. You know, the average age of death from COVID in this country is 83 for women and 81 for men.
Which is older than your average life expectancy anyway.
Exactly. So there was, you know, was there a problem in the first place? Did we need to have this intervention in the first place? The answer is no. And is there an alternative treatment? And the answer is yes, that's safe and effective, which is treating acute COVID. You know, they did that very successfully in South Africa, in Japan, in India, in Uttar Pradesh, a population of 240 million people. In the height of the pandemic, they had 400,000 cases a day, and then over 3,000 deaths a day, I believe. And then they started using proper treatment, which is very cheap and effective. And
the drug that we dare not say its name.
And vitamins and minerals and antihistamines, and within weeks it went from over 400,000 to 3,500 cases a day, and from 3,000 plus deaths a day to 2 to 3 deaths a day, which shows what can be done. So, you know, was the intervention necessary? No. Were there other things that could be done? Yes, that were safe and effective. Was it effective? No. We know that from ONS, actually Office of National Statistics data shows that people who've had the vaccine are more likely to catch COVID. And we know biologically why that is, because it causes immunosuppression. So these people are more and more, the more doses they have, the more immunosuppressed they are, the less able their bodies are to cope with an infection, the more likely they are to catch COVID. And they're also now, there's a phenomenon we've identified called IgG4. Now, IgG4 is a type of immunoglobulin.
Yes. I've been listening. I'm so obsessed with all of this stuff. Yeah.
Immunoglobulin. And immunoglobulin 4 is normally 0.4% of the immunoglobulins. And when people have had 2 doses, it goes up to 20%, which is very peculiar. And that means that their bodies are now tolerating the spike protein, and therefore they're not going to react to it at all. So when they catch it again, their body has no defence against it.
So for thick people like me, the body is going, this alien obstacle, this thing, the spike protein arrives. The cell is taught to attack it, but it's a stranger, and as a result, it stops being able to attack anything else.
Yeah. So what we think is happening is because the messenger RNA goes inside the cells because of the very toxic lipid nanoparticles, it goes inside the cell and
so those are the fatty bits that collect around your reproductive organs and stuff like that. Is that
exactly, correct? And gets it into your blood through the blood-brain barrier and through the placental barrier. Okay, so that spike protein can get into these vital organs, and then the messenger RNA enters through the lipid nanoparticle in the previously healthy cells and starts making a little factory to make trillions of spike protein. Okay, trillions. And that spike protein is the toxic pathogen. And it's in all our tissues. Now, we know from the biodistribution studies that were done in Japan that 16% of it goes to the ovaries and the testicles. So it's no wonder that the sperm count was down and the motility was down. It's no wonder that we're seeing miscarriages. It's no wonder we're seeing menstrual irregularities in women. A very high percentage of women, over 50% of women, report that they have strange bleeding, either absent bleeding or...
All my female friends who have had the jab are reporting the same thing. But that's just anecdotal. Sorry, Ofcom, if I've done something wrong.
Yes. Well, I have patients who haven't bled, who are postmenopausal, haven't bled for 10, 15 years, suddenly have heavy bleeding. Very alarming, very shocking.
So if there's a lesson that we need to take from what these last 3 years have brought to us societally and medically, from a medical perspective, what would you say when the next inevitable pandemic comes across? What is your advice to the public and to the medical profession?
We need to have more open discussion from the very beginning about what is going on so that we can have experienced epidemiologists, not just government experts.
Great Barrington Declarationists, rather than...
Great Barrington Declaration, absolutely. You know, look after the vulnerable and shield them.
Apply logic to life.
Exactly. Exactly. So look at things like, is it necessary? What is the threat? You know, the modelling that went on was 10 times, they said the threat was 10 times greater than it actually was. And the modelling has never been right. They were wrong for swine flu, they were wrong for bird flu, they were wrong for SARS-CoV-1, and they were wrong for SARS-CoV-2. So I don't think I would listen to the modellers at all, because they're constantly
Some people
wrong.
might say they should all be fired.
Well, I would agree with that.
Dr. Tina Pearce, thank you so much, and thank you so much for making that accessible to thick people like me. Thank you so much
pleasure. Thank you for
joining
inviting
us.
me.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, Dr. Tina Pearce. Coming up next, Dr. Roland Salmon, former Director of Communicable Diseases for Public Health Wales. He will give the other side of the argument and his view in the data and the figures and the excess deaths. We'll be back in 3...
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hiya. So, we're talking about vaccine efficacy and excess deaths this evening, as you may have noticed. We've just heard the opinions of Dr. Pearce. Joining me now, who has been listening to the entire show so far, is Dr. Roland Salmon, former Director of Communicable Diseases for Public Health Wales. Good evening, Roland. How are you? What do you
I'm very well, Laurence. Good evening.
What do you make of what Dr. Pearce just said?
Well, I find myself, to start with, very sympathetic in general from where she's come from. I mean, I do think we needed more open discussion. I am a signatory of the Great Barrington Declaration, though I did wonder about the wisdom of that slightly afterwards when it became so highly politicised. And I do believe we should have looked after the vulnerable more carefully. I'm very sceptical about modelling and have written to Le Monde and the London Review of Books to express those views. However, I do end up in a rather different place when it comes to pregnant women. We had a blizzard of scientific information, very eloquently presented, but there are one or two key things that I think we perhaps need to bear in mind. Pregnant women are at much higher risk than their non-pregnant peers when it comes to COVID. They're at about 3 times, if they get COVID, they're at about 3 times the risk of admission to intensive care units and being ventilated and getting extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, superventilation, if you want to call it that. And they have about a 50% higher risk of dying. This was a big US Centers for Disease Control study from the first wave of the pandemic. So there is a risk there, and we have to ask ourselves, how do we address that? And
sorry just to interrupt
go
you.
On, jump in, Laurence.
Pregnant women shouldn't be dying. It's sort of a very unnatural thing
Absolutely.
to happen.
I agree.
We can't say, well, COVID makes people die. It's like, what? It's a bad
my point
flu.
here is, how do we protect them against that? And it seems to me vaccine has to be part of our armamentarium here. Now, there are issues around mRNA vaccines. One of them, of course, is that, as Dr. Pearce pointed out, they're new technologies, and we cannot know altogether what they're going to do in the long term. And
well, then why were we told they were safe and effective? Why were we told? Why was the public told they were safe and effective? And then you're saying to me, from Public Health Wales, you're turning around and going, we can't know the long-term data, when the public were told day after day that they were safe and effective.
Hang on, Laurence. I mean, first I better tell you, I've long since been retired from Public Health Wales, so I've no axe to grind for the government, the MHRA and anything else. I mean, when you have a new technology that's newly introduced, in as much as people told you it was safe and effective, they could only mean for the length of time that they've been able to observe it. And in the short term, the UK Health Security Agency data does suggest that actually the risks of adverse effects, be that to the fetus or the mother, aren't any higher in the vaccinated than the unvaccinated. But I'm with you on this. With new technologies, we need caution in the longer term. And we also need, and here I do agree with Dr. Pearce, I find much that I'm in sympathy with, much better and more efficient systems of adverse drug reaction monitoring than the yellow card system that we've got. We need what used to be called prescription event monitoring, where actually we enumerate each prescription, each vaccination it's given, and then follow up each person in detail. And with modern information technology, it seems to me something that was rather ruled out because of cost 20 or 30 years ago when it was first being discussed, becomes much more possible. When you do that, you have a much better idea. The second thing is, you never talk out these sorts of concerns, and I'm certainly not trying to do that with you. In as much as people are concerned about, I don't know, excess myocardial infarctions in Israel or excess deaths in the UK, that can be done by field epidemiology studies. And my view is that's the way to answer that question. And we will either decide that we've got a substantial problem, or will there to rest.
But yes, and I take completely on board what you're saying, but to your average person who has had to live through this hell for the last 3 years, they were told these vaccines were safe and effective and our way out of the pandemic. They gave up years of their life. Even if these vaccines were safe and effective and brilliant, we've got a major problem with the fact that we shut down the entire of society. And now that we're dealing with these excess deaths, there is absolute silence from the government and those involved in the fear-mongering. What do you have to say about the excess deaths? What do you feel about those? Do those lives matter?
I think there are a few things about the excess deaths. Firstly, In Public Health sort of 101, the introductory public health courses that all of us did, you're taught that three things give you excess deaths: excess hot weather, excess cold weather, and flu epidemics. We've had all three of those in addition to COVID. So I think there are other things that you can invoke, but my own view is that don't talk it out, go and investigate it. It's not that difficult to do, and with the modern record linkage systems, that could be done quite quickly. And as I say, we then get a clear idea of how much these different things contributed to it. As for the lockdown,
should we ever have declared a pandemic at all?
Should we ever? Can't hear you.
With these excess deaths happening now, I'm looking at the excess deaths during the pandemic. Should we ever have even declared a pandemic? Was there ever a pandemic?
Well, there was certainly a new virus that was circulated in more than one continent of the world, and that's the definition of a pandemic, and there's certainly high death rates among the elderly and the vulnerable. So I think it was reasonable to call it a pandemic. What it wasn't reasonable to do, I think, was to stop large chunks of the population going about their business when they were at very low risk, and in fact, rather lose our focus on those people, for example, over 75 who were at really rather high risk. You know, it seems to me our whole response got rather out of kilter, which is, I suppose, at the core of the viewpoint of the Great Barrington Declaration originators.
Which you're a supporter of the Great Barrington Declaration?
Yes, I am, because I say I do believe in focused protection rather than these more global measures. Whereas I say I think I differ from your last speaker is it seems to me that among the vulnerable, one's got to very seriously consider pregnant women.
So help me out with that, with the pregnant women thing, because obviously I'm not a woman and I know nothing about anything to do with biology. So
no more am I, Laurence. No more am I.
Why should we be worrying about pregnant women when you know, obviously we understand that pregnancy and giving birth is very difficult, and there's this odd concept that I hear from, not odd concept, it's actually a very valid argument that I hear from a lot of women who say that the medical profession itself is the definition of the patriarchy, that it was designed by men for men. And is there something there that we just don't understand how to treat women nowadays, and they have not been the priority in modern medicine or in the iteration we know it?
Well, I mean, I'd probably look like the very definition of a patriarch, so I better be fairly careful how I express myself here. I mean, I'm simply going back to the information that we have at our disposal that tells us how much worse the outcome of COVID is in women who are pregnant compared with women who aren't pregnant. Now, I'm quite happy to put that question back to my female peers and indeed to other females generally and say, well, what do you want to do about that? But my answer to that is, if you have a vaccine that will afford protection during pregnancy, you might want to seriously consider having it.
Unless it causes a lot of miscarriages. But anyway, thank you, Dr. Roland Salmon. A lot of common sense and some stuff we disagree on, which is what the point of free expression is. So thank you for joining me, Director of Communicable Diseases and for Public Health in Wales. Right. Oh, Lordy, this has been quite emotional tonight. Coming up, you are putting me on the spot and I get your reaction to the first half of the show. I will be back in 3.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh,
She's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Hey, I'm very glad we had those two chats. I feel they were very important. But earlier, I asked you to put me on the spot with a question. It's time for Fox on the Spot. First up, Marcus. Why are our rivers and beaches so polluted? This is a issue close to my heart, Marcus. I'll tell you what, my friend Matt Hayes, who was on the show the other day, who's just the world's greatest fisherman and greatest environmentalist, said that the reason why the River Wye, which is the best barbel fishing river in the world, where I caught a specimen barbel not showing off, is polluted is because of factory chicken farming and the excrement of chickens. So I think, you know, and it also happened with my local river. We had the same problem. Farmers would furrow things in different ways. I don't know as much about the ocean, so I'm not so good. But I think, you know, over-farming, intensive farming is definitely not so good, and we should protect all of our waterways and our environment for our children. Right, this is one from Twitter. Where have vegetarians gone? Everything is vegan. I am reminded of a joke that said vegetarians don't actually live longer. It just feels like they do. Yeah, vegan madness. I mean, except for Novak Djokovic, he's good vegan, isn't he? But the rest of it just looks like... I went out with a girl once who had bacon, and the list of ingredients were terrifying. Anyway, here's the final question from Mason. How long have you been... Cass! How long have you been a Freemason? What's Freemason? It's this, is it? Oh, funny handshakes. I'm not a Freemason. Why? How can I join? Will it get me uncancelled? Can I be back in show business if I'm a Freemason? Look, I'm willing to do everything. Do you roll up a leg? I don't know. Big up the Freemasons. If you can help me out of trouble, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, so earlier on, I asked you for your reactions to email in after some of the COVID discussion, and Sam says, it is my profound belief that the benefits of the vaccine far, far outweigh the risks. Got 2 fars. I've had 4 jabs and had no adverse effects. Well, I don't think I'm going to have an opportunity to challenge you, Dan, and best of luck with your balls. Diane says, I am 82, husband 85, and we wouldn't have the vaccine. We're the only ones in our family and neighbourhood who haven't had COVID. Yippee! Good for you. You're like my Uncle Alan and Auntie Margaret. Hi, Uncle Alan and Auntie Margaret, because I know you'll be watching. Thank you for all your messages. Coming up, I am dishing my thoughts with the James Dean of the Conservative Party, Andrew Bridgen, rebel with a cause, MP for North West Leicestershire. I will be back in 3.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Laurence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News. Hey, every week I sit down with someone and discuss our differences, or not in this case. It was the turn of Andrew Bridgen, MP for North West Leicestershire this week. Many of you will know Andrew's view on the vaccine. They're much the same as mine. These are, and I stress, our views. Ofcom. You can draw your own conclusion by researching everything discussed in the show. The government and the NHS have been clear and maintain the following. The coronavirus vaccines are safe and effective. They give you the best protection against COVID-19. Andrew Bridgen, rebel with a cause. Cheers.
I can drink to that.
Do you think you exploded your political career by coming out and saying what you did?
That depends. That's debatable if you think I have a political or have had a political career. The fact that the government will never admit it, but they had to backtrack. So, beginning of December, they wanted to extend the vaccination down to babies of 6 months of age. By the middle of January, well, 25th of January there, only over 50s and the vulnerable, and they'll go further than that. I'm hopefully going to be giving a speech next week on the efficacy of the boosters using the government's own figures. And I think once I've delivered that speech, that should wrap up pretty much the booster programme and the vaccination with mRNA. And not delivered yet, but it's in the pipeline.
And I hear rumours from the corridors of Westminster that, some MPs keep popping up to you and saying, oh, maybe you're not absolutely stark raving mad after all. Is this true?
Well, there has certainly been a change in the temperature. Monday was a one-line whip, so there weren't many MPs in. But Tuesday, 5 or 6 MPs, not your normal suspects, from 3 different parties whose names I will not pass out, but they came up to me and said, you're definitely onto something around the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. Keep going. It was not open public support yet, but if 5 MPs from 3 different parties took the time to come up and say that to me, so yeah, we're winning the hearts and minds. We've already got the public, I think, but we're finally influencing the people who could actually do something to halt the vaccine rollout altogether, and then divert funds so we can start looking at sorting out the vaccine damage and the harms.
So what you're hoping and what you think is going to happen is that week after week, after week after week, we're going to start to see, we're going to have revealed more excess deaths, more vaccine harms, and you think, as you say, it's a one-way street. You don't think there's a way of burying this under a carpet, sweeping it away, hiding it, blaming it on statins. You don't think there's... I
sometimes wonder if the government just sit there and think, what is today's excuse or this week's excuse for the excess deaths, whether it's statins or lack of appointments. But I mean, it just doesn't stack up against the numbers. It doesn't stack up against the science. And I think, as I said in my speech on the 13th of December, I think we've sacrificed enough of our citizens already on the altar of ignorance and unfettered corporate greed. And the sooner it stops, the better. I can't stop it on my own. I can only stop it when enough colleagues in the House of Commons, we have a majority, and force the government to stop it. What I think is happening is there's an increasing pressure coming on every MP from their constituents in their inbox. And I would encourage GBNews viewers and their friends and family to email their MPs, their elected representatives.
Putting this aside, you're at war with your own party in a way, with the government, because you were saying something and you're saying the government have done this, the government have done that. This is your own political party.
Well, I was warned in a meeting a couple of weeks ago that by a senior colleague who I was trying to recruit to the cause, who told me that I could well be proven right in 20 years' time, rather like the thalidomide. Well, that won't do. And he also said that you need to be aware that you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world. Well, for me personally, my vested interest is the health and well-being of my constituents in North West Leicestershire and the wider public.
Because you've done a great job in North West Leicestershire, haven't you? But I mean, let's...
If I do say so myself.
But getting away from...
It's a brilliant place. The people are brilliant. Yeah, we've got the highest economic growth in the country, converted what was probably the poorest seat in Leicestershire in 12 years to the richest. It's the only part of Leicester and Rutland that's above UK average salaries. We build enough houses to keep house prices about 20% less than UK average. So that's the sweet spot. We've also, working with the Conservative-controlled District Council, we've delivered the longest council tax freeze in the history of the UK, 15 years, and we're hoping to do more. So, yeah, we've got 1.2 jobs for every person of working age in the constituency.
So why don't you have
the biggest retained business rates in the country.
Why don't you have the whip?
Because I broke the narrative, and I'm absolutely convinced that I will be vindicated, as will the eminent scientists and doctors who had the bravery to speak out and tell the truth to the public. And as Orwell said, in a time of universal deceit, even the act of telling the truth is seen as revolutionary.
And what do you think the public are going to want once they find out? Should you be? I mean, I obviously have to provide a level of balance. Should you be proved completely wrong?
I wish I would be. I honestly wish, for the well-being of everybody, that I was going to be proved complete. Nothing would make me happier than to be proved completely wrong, and I could bow out of politics and say, look, I made a big mistake, I'm out of this, and really, but the world is safe and everything's fine. But I'm afraid that's not the case.
Well, you talk about this, about democracy, you said there was no democracy, but what I found so chilling about what happened in the House wasn't so much the defamatory allegations made against you. It was the fact that you had spoken and you had the standard response to anyone who's asking a legitimate question, which is to be called a racist in some way. And that, in your House of Commons, is chilling, because if you can't have free speech in the House of Commons, you don't have it in the country. And if you don't have free speech, you don't have a democracy, do you?
and we saw the pile on from the usual suspects. But quite honestly, the Jewish community have absolutely stood up for me. We've got the open letter from 25 of the world's leading Jewish doctors and scientists has gone to Rishi Sunak, demanding that I'm immediately reinstated to the party, dismissing claims of anti-Semitism, and indeed questioning the Prime Minister that, shutting down of free speech in a parliament of elected representatives is the first sign of a totalitarian regime. I'm not as easy to silence as
I've noticed.
As some. Well, what I would notice is, apart from GB News, I mean, I used to do a lot of media mysteriously prior to the 13th of December when I gave that speech. I probably would do, Newsnight once a fortnight, lots of local news, ITV, Sky, Channel 4 News quite regularly. Not been invited on one since.
I wonder why that is. Trying to...
I don't know. Something must have happened.
What happened?
Don't know.
I'm thinking.
I don't know.
You did something.
I did something.
You did something.
Yeah, and I also used to get asked to make a lot of comments on sort of, items in the news of political interest.
So what are you doing as well now? Okay, so
I'm doing a lot more on social media. So since the 13th of December, my Twitter followers have more than trebled. I'm doing lots of podcasts. I'm going to go and do one this afternoon. I'm doing those, and my reach on social media has ballooned. So, as I said to Chris Hope, who's just gone to GB News, when he was still the other week at the Telegraph, I've known him there for over a decade. I said, how many newspapers do you sell a day? And he said, about 250,000. I said, well, I don't really need you, do I, to cover my story, because that would be a bad tweet.
Yeah, exactly.
250,000 would be a bad tweet.
Is it the end of the legacy media?
Well, I think there's going to be not only the politicians who've have known what was going on and either didn't stop it when they should have or have allowed it to proceed. I mean, the legacy media are also culpable. They can't say they haven't been told, because I've told them.
Andrew Bridgen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. I'll finish my coffee now.
Yeah, you can.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest forecast from the Met Office. Dry and settled right throughout the weekend. There will be some sunny spells, but those clear skies could mean a frost for many of us at night. And the reason for this is high pressure dominates the weather scene, sat right across the UK over the weekend, meaning weather fronts are kept at bay and it will stay dry and settled right throughout. So back to this evening time, we've got clearing skies across many areas. Northerly breeze still bringing in some showers across eastern Scotland and eastern England, but generally dry for the vast majority of the UK. Under those clear skies, temperatures will fall away. -2 to -4 Celsius possible, particularly across the north and the west, so a frost to greet us on Saturday morning. But that means there'll be plenty of sunshine from the word go, with the exception, though, across northeast Scotland, eastern parts of England, still a few showers being brought in from the North Sea, though the northerly breeze does ease as we go through the day. Generally dry for many through into the afternoon on Saturday. Sunny spells, the best of the sunshine across the northwest, and temperatures overall generally between 6 and 9 Celsius, so a little bit lower compared to what we saw during the day on Friday. Into the evening time, the cloud starts to melt away once more. Still the risk of 1 or 2 showers down the east coast with that northerly breeze, and under the clear skies overnight into Sunday morning, a frost returning once more, particularly across western areas, and again temperatures -2 to -4 in the countryside, hovering nearer to freezing in the main towns and cities. So it means a mixed start to Sunday. There'll be patchy frost across northern, western and southern parts of the UK. Further east, a cloudier start, 1 or 2 showers possible. Through the day, the best of the sunshine holds on across southern counties of England, parts of Northern Ireland, central and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the cloud will build up at times. Temperatures will be similar to Saturday, so generally around, if not a little below average for the time of year. And there'll be more to come as we head into next week.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes, already depressed.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.